Introduction to Anthropology, Chapter 1, asking the basic question, what is anthropology? Um, Now you can follow along in your textbook. This lecture is not intended to replace reading the text. You still need to do that. The text is very complete. There are areas that it will send you into a possible video uh, clip. That's up to you whether you wish to follow that or not. I've included some in, on D2L, but uh, you need to do the reading in addition to watching these videos. In these lectures, I'm going to hit the high points of the chapters. For instance, Chapter 1, Introduction, Understanding Ourselves. Who we are. Uh, is a product of the cultures that we've experienced. One way to think about this is through the exercise of imagining what our lives would have been like if we had been born and raised in a different place. Who we are, what we are, uh, is partially determined by where we're raised and how we're raised. Um, some things we're very, very fortunate. Let me give you an illustration. I'm retired from the Navy, and I used to play a little poker. There was this one poker game where I got dealt 4 queens. Now, if you know anything about playing poker, you know that 4 queens is virtually unbeatable. The pot went very high because it turned out that one of the other fellas at the table had been dealt 4 sevens. But, you know, uh, I cleaned up. What on earth is that camera doing? It just shot up over my head. Um, where was I? I lost it. Oh, yeah, yeah. After the game, a couple of fellas came in. Oh, congratulations. That was really good. You really are a good poker player. Well, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. But I don't think you're going to be able to make that determination based on being dealt 4 queens. I mean, that's complete luck. Complete luck. Now, it was even luckier for me because the fellow that got dealt 4 sevens was, I mean, what are the odds of having 2 4 of a kinds? But the bottom line is where we are born, you have absolutely nothing, you've done nothing to determine where you're born. What you do with the advantages that are given to you, that's where you can begin to take some pride. A culture is an environmental force that shapes our personalities and our bodies by influencing, among other things, what we do, what we eat, and what we think. How we think uh, is a product of our culture. Anthropology relies on cross-cultural tests to understand the particulars, the particularities of individual groups, uh, as well as wider generalizations about all humans. Human diversity is the second major subheading that we're going to talk about. Anthropology is anthropology is the study of the human species and its immediate ancestors. Anthropology is holistic in that the discipline is concerned with studying the whole of the human condition, past, present, and future, biology, society, language, and culture. This kind of reminds me of a joke that my daughter recently told me. Um, Past, present, and future go into a bar. It was tense. Well, I thought it was funny. Um, Anthropology offers a unique cross-cultural perspective by constantly comparing the customs of one society with those of another. Humans are among the most adaptable animals in the world, having the ability to inhabit widely variant ecological niches. That's one thing that sets us apart. The biological definition of evolution is that an organism adapts to its environment. Well, human beings are able to live in virtually any environment without um, biologic enhancements. I mean, we are able to reason and we are able to produce and we are able to invent. We can survive in the Arctic. My goodness, I was a submariner for all those years. I lived underwater. Um, we're able to thrive wherever we find ourselves. Um, Humans, like all other animals, that the text keeps referring to us as animals, and I guess biologically we are animals at the top of the chain, but that's what the text keeps referring to us as. And so I am using um, the language that the text uses. Now, I don't always agree. Sometimes I will tell you, well, I'm not sure that the author is correct here. But at any rate, humans, like all other animals, use biological means to adapt to a given environment. That's one way. Um, Humans are unique in having cultural means of adaptation. Humans, in general, share both society and culture. Society is organized life in groups, a feature that humans share with other animals. Cultures are traditions and customs transmitted through learning that form and guide the beliefs and behaviors of the people exposed to them. While culture is not biological, the ability to use it rests in hominid biology. The third heading, adaptation, variation, and change. Adaptation is a process by which organisms cope with environmental forces and stresses. A human adaptation involves interaction between culture and biology to satisfy individual goals. There are four types of human adaptation: cultural, genetic, long-term physiological, or my notes are sometimes it's hard to read them. Long-term physiological or developmental adaptation, and short-term or immediate um, physiological adaptation. Now, through time, social and cultural means of adaptation have become increasingly important for human groups. Human groups have devised they've devised diverse ways of coping with a wide range of environments. The rate of cultural adaptation has been rapidly accelerating during the last 10,000 years. Food production developed between 12 and 10,000 years ago, according to the text, after millions of years during which foraging was the sole basis for human subsistence. Now, if you are a forager, you have no time for anything else but um, coming up with a way to raise crops. Now, that's a lot of work, but it's still less work than foraging. The first civilizations developed between 6 and 5,000 years ago. And more recently, the spread of industrial production has profoundly affected human life. It sure has. Um, Industrialization is where we have been able to save enough time to really develop other human aspects. Um, Appreciating diversity, new section. The text talks about give me a hug. One way in which culture is dynamic and changing involves Margaret Mead's generation gap, which refers to clashes between parents and children over cultural practices and values. Uh, you know, I'll use as an example something that I've noticed. Um, the Japanese people, for instance, a generation ago, the Japanese people were very, very disciplined, and everything was structured around work. Today, not so much. Children have changed, and they're clashing with the traditional aspects of culture. Um, This generation gap is exemplified by recent controversies over what kind of displays of affection are appropriate in schools. Older practices like the handshake and the high five seem to be giving way to a plethora of greetings that involve much more bodily contact and challenge previous ideas of intimacy, personal space, and gender. All right, a new subheading: General Anthropology. The four subdisciplines of U.S. anthropology is what we're going to discuss now. The academic discipline of U.S. anthropology is unique in that it includes four subdisciplines: cultural anthropology, which is what we're studying now; archaeological anthropology; biological or physical anthropology; and linguistic anthropology. I would have to say of these four, I'm more comfortable with linguistic anthropology. But all of these are very, very important. The origin of U.S. anthropology can be traced to the 19th century. Early American anthropologists were especially concerned with exploring the origins and diversity of Native American groups, studying their customs, their social life, language, and physical traits. And this four-field approach to studying human societies did not develop in Europe. Um, in most European universities, archaeology is not considered a subdiscipline of anthropology. It is its own department. Um, the text just makes it seem like Dr. Kotek's um, opinions are set in concrete. And I would say I have never really considered the fourfold approach. I've always considered archaeology to be its own discipline, but you know, um, I can see where Dr. Kotek drew his information. The four subdisciplines share a similar goal of exploring variation in time and space to improve our understanding of the basics of human biology, society, and culture, and how they interrelate. These explorations employ, among other things, variation in time. That is, using information from contemporary groups to model changes that took place in the past, and using knowledge gained from past groups to understand what is likely to happen in the future. Reconstructing ancient languages by studying modern ones, for instance. Um, Ancient Greek is different than modern Greek. Ancient Hebrew, oh my goodness, they didn't use vowel points. It wasn't until the Masoretes that vowel points were included. And so you can really learn from studying the modern languages against the ancient ones. That is, if there is an ancient form. Variation in space. Synchronic research, comparing information collected from human societies existing at roughly the same time, but from different locations. Um, what is the race concept in the United States as opposed to Brazil, as opposed to Japan? Any conclusions about human nature must be pursued with a comparative cross-cultural approach. I teach ethics as well and bioethics, and it's absolutely true that you need to look at the concepts across a variety of cultures. Just because one culture has an idea, and generally cultures think that their idea is the only idea, does that make it necessarily so? Cultural forces shape human biology. Cultural traditions promote certain activities and abilities. They discourage others, and they set standards of physical well-being and attractiveness. What is attractive in one culture isn't necessarily what's attractive in another. As an example, the United States seems to personify or to think that beauty personified is a stick figure. But if you go to China or an Oriental country, that's just simply not the case. We say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but I would also tell you that your culture influences aesthetics. Cultural standards of attractiveness and proprietary influence, participation, and achievement in sports. Um, Again, in Brazil, body ideals for women disfavor the big, strong shoulders and firm bodies of female competitive swimmers. Read that section in your text. It's very enlightening. Let's talk about the subdisciplines of anthropology. Cultural anthropology combines ethnography and ethnology to study human societies and cultures for the purpose of describing, analyzing, interpreting, and explaining social and cultural similarities and differences. Ethnography produces an account, a book, an article, a film of a particular community, society, or culture based on information that is collected during fieldwork. Generally, ethnographic fieldwork involves living in the community that is being studied for an extended period of time, 6 months to 2 years. Ethnographic fieldwork has traditionally tended to emphasize local behavior, beliefs, customs, social life, economic activities, politics, and religion, rather than solely examining programs and policies at the national level. It's a local look. If we were studying I'm in Bemidji. I'm not sure where all of you are, but in Bemidji, if we wanted to study, we would settle into one of the neighborhoods and we would look at life in that neighborhood rather than at the state level or at the national level. That's the difference. Since cultures uh, aren't isolated, ethnographers must investigate the linkages of local, regional, national, and global systems of politics, economics, and information that affect people's lives across the world. Ethnology examines, interprets, and analyzes and compares the results of ethnography. Ethnology compares and contrasts the particular data gathered in different societies to make generalizations about society and culture. Ethnology uses ethnographic data and findings from other subfields to identify theories and enhance our understanding of social and cultural systems. Ethnology works from the particular to the general, from the ethnographic data to a theory. Archaeological anthropology reconstructs, describes, and interprets human behavior and cultural patterns through material remains. The material remains of a culture include potsherds, jewelry, tools, even garbage, burials, and the remains of structures. Archaeologists and paleo-ecological studies are. I'm going to start one more time. I can barely read my notes. Archaeological uh, Archaeologists use paleo-ecological studies to establish the ecological and subsistence parameters within which given groups lived. Archaeologists reconstruct behavior patterns and lifestyles of the past, as well as changes over time in a given area by excavation. It's really interesting and fascinating work. Um, The archaeological record provides archaeologists a unique opportunity to look at changes in social complexity over thousands, even tens of thousands of years, a time depth not accessible to ethnographers, and I would add not necessarily germane to ethnographers. Ethnographers are looking at culture now. Archaeologists are looking at the cultures of the past that helped develop the cultures that are now. Archaeology is not restricted to prehistoric societies. For instance, studying sunken ships off the Florida coast, underwater archaeologists have verified the living conditions on the vessels that brought ancestral African Americans to the New World as enslaved people. William Rathje's Garbology project in Tucson, Arizona, drew attention to the anthropological information to be discovered in modern landfills. Biologic or physical anthropology investigates human biological diversity across time and space. A focus on biological variation unites the 5 special interests within biological anthropology. Paleoanthropology, the study of human evolution as it is revealed by the fossil record, human genetics, human growth and development, human biological plasticity, the body's ability to change as it copes with stresses brought on by heat, cold, and altitude. And then primatology, the study of the biology, evolution, behavior, and social life of primates. Biological anthropology is multidisciplinary as it draws on biology, zoology, geology, anatomy, physiology, medicine, public health, osteology, and archaeology. Now let's talk about linguistic anthropology. It is the study of language in its social and cultural context across space and time. Some linguistic anthropologists investigate universal features of language that may be linked to uniformities in the human brain. Historical linguists reconstruct ancient languages and study linguistic variation through time. This is where I did some of my work. Linguistic anthropologists have studied linguistic differences to examine the relationship of language structure and thought patterns in different cultures. Sociolinguistic investigates relationships between social and linguistic variation. Now we're going to look at anthropology and how it relates to other academic fields. Anthropology's broad scope and status as a scientific and humanistic discipline has always fostered interdisciplinary collaboration. Anthropology is a science in that it is a systematic field of study that uses experiments, observations, and deduction to produce reliable explanations of human cultural and biologic phenomena. Anthropology also has strong links to the humanities in that it encompasses the study of cross-cultural comparisons of languages, texts, philosophies, arts, music, performances, and other forms of created expression. Now, Dr. Kodak really believes that our anthropology is a scientific discipline. If you talk to other scientists, they might disagree, some of them fairly strongly. They would think that it is more the second aspect, more of a study in the humanities than in the sciences. I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Cultural anthropology and sociology. Excuse me a minute. Jen, would you shut my door? I'm sitting here in my study in the middle of the morning. My kids are getting up. Cultural anthropology and sociology share an interest in social relations, organization, and behavior. Traditionally, sociologists have tended to focus on the industrial West, particularly the United States and Europe, whereas anthropologists have most often studied societies in places other than the United States and Europe. Cultural anthropologists have primarily used in-depth and qualitative methods, such as participant observation. Sociologists, on the other hand, have tended to employ surveys and other quantitative methods which apply sampling and statistical techniques. In many areas and with many topics, anthropology and sociology are converging. The sharp divide that once might have been perceivable between the two disciplines, particularly in the kinds of societies that sociologists and anthropologists studied and the methodologies of their research, they no longer exist. How about anthropology and psychology? Psychological anthropology has contributed a cross-cultural perspective to the concepts developed in psych, both on psychoanalytic propositions, and on issues of development and cognition. In early contributions to the cross-cultural study of human psychology, Bronislaw Malinowski's work among the Trobriand Islanders suggested modifications in Freud's famous theory of the universality of the Oedipus complex. Applied anthropology. Applied anthropology refers to the application of anthropological perspectives, theory, methods, and data to identify, assess, and solve social problems. Applied anthropologists come from all four subfields of anthropology. For example, applied medical anthropologists consider the socio-cultural and biological context and implications of diseases and illness. Applied archaeologists work in cultural resource management. They work in contract archaeology, public educational programs, and historic preservations. We'll move on to appreciating anthropology. Anthropologist's son elected president. Obama's mother, Dr. Stanley Ann Dunham Sotero, was an applied anthropologist who devoted her life to appreciating and understanding human diversity. She used this understanding to solve socioeconomic problems in Indonesia through microfinance programs. And she's often credited with instilling in Obama self-assurance and drive, a desire to bridge boundaries, and even his high comfort level with strong women. Now we're going to talk about something completely different, the scientific method. Anthropology is a humanistic science that uses ethnology to compare, contrast, and make generalizations about societies and cultures located in various times and places. Theories, associations, and explanations. A theory is an explanatory framework that helps us understand why something exists. An association is an observed relationship between two or more measured variables. A theory is more general, suggesting or implying associations and attempting to explain them. Scientific explanations rely upon data to predict future occurrences. Hypothesis testing, associations in the social sciences. Scientists generate and test hypotheses in order to better understand the world. Associations are explored to help illustrate a general principle, like the association between the state of water and air temperature. In the social sciences, associations are usually stated probability, probabilistically. Two or more variables tend to be related in a predictable way, but there are exceptions. Theories provide explanations for associations. Theories suggest patterns, connections, and relationships that may be confirmed by new research. For instance, John Wesley Mayhew Whitting examined the connection between the postpartum sex taboo and a low-protein diet suggesting that the taboo is advantageous to the health of babies with low protein diets because as a result of the taboo, they breastfeed longer. This example demonstrates the connections between hypothesis, data, and theory. Sample selection, reliable measurements, and legitimate statistical methods are important elements in generating and testing hypotheses. I'm going to point something out here. The scientific method and the historical method. The scientific method requires experimentation. In order to prove something scientifically, something simple, such as the fact that water boils at 212 degree Fahrenheit, how are we going to prove that? Well, we take some water, we take a pan, we take a heat source and a way to measure, and we boil the water, and we boil it again, and we boil it again, and we boil it again, and we boil it again ad infinitum until we have proven that water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. It needs to be repeatable. Historically, how do I prove something? Humanistically, how do I prove something? Like, how about even something simple like Washington crossed the Delaware? Eyewitness accounts, everyone's dead. The only way is to take written accounts. And by the way, recently, the theories come up that he didn't cross the Delaware at the date that we often believe that he did it the night before. Interesting. So we take written accounts and compare them and compare them and compare them until we are relatively certain of something. That's the difference between the scientific method and the historical method. I would ask you, when we're talking about anthropology, are we going to be able to prove anything scientifically? I would say it would be difficult to do this. Well, that concludes chapter 1. I hope this helps. If you read the chapter, if you view this video, and then if you look at the PowerPoints, I think it will really, really, really make everything come together. If you have any questions, if you have any problems or concerns, email me or call me. Have a great week.